Welcome to Self-Helpful. I'm your guide, Kevin Miller, and I curate the sea of new personal development messages to bring the most influential leaders onto this show. Join me as I question my guests to better understand their counsel so we can all integrate the wisdom into our lives, because we all want to elevate our own experience and improve the way we show up for others. The Self-Helpful podcast is presented by Ziglar, your premier source for equipping coaches. Visit Ziglar.com. Welcome to the Peak Wellness episode, where we seek to strengthen our bodies, which are our foundations, and build our lives on top of them. In this episode, how to mitigate and manage your genetic set points. I really want life to be only what I make it and deny any genetic limitations. And yet I realize we do, in fact, have some genetic set points that can help and hinder us along the way. I've suffered some by denying any genetic hindering, but our culture, by far and large, I see suffering for blaming too much on genetics. And the big question is then, how much of an impact do genetics have on your health? And it's not the same answer for everyone, obviously. And we're not here to discount the role of genetics at all. We want to elevate the issue right here. Yet the goal is to take as much agency as possible. The goal is to give you hope that you're not a victim to your genetics. So let's discuss how much of a role they do play in your health and wellness and what you can do to compensate for and negate them as much as possible. I'm, of course, joined here today by my Peak Wellness co-host, Randy James, medical doctor and functional medicine expert, who walks with patients every single day as they pursue their best wellness amongst all varieties of genetic challenges. And you can watch these full episodes on YouTube if you'd like. Just go there, search for Self-Helpful with Kevin Miller. Genetics. So I wanted to hit this. We talk about it. It comes up so often in our shows, I think a lot recently. And admittedly, I want to hit genetics. You know, what role do they actually play in our health? How should we address dealing with them? What should we find out, tests and whatever? But to be open with my muse, it's the frustration that I have with our culture. And I'm going to pick on American culture as usual, and feeling like we look at genetics as it's just the lottery. And if we get sick, if we get a disease, if we're infirm, if whatever, or if, the opposite, somebody's 80 and spry, good genetics. I mean, we've been saying that always.
For a long time. Yeah.
And it irritates me.
I love this topic. I'm glad you're irritated.
But I probably should have compassion. That should probably come out in here too.
Well, okay. There's going to be a time and a place for the reality that genetics is a real thing. And I'm going to have compassion on you because you're a white guy and maybe you got a sunburn. And we could blame genetics, and I'm going to have compassion. But at the same time, I'm also going to encourage you to say, hey, you should learn from that. And
there's a key word, though, blame. There we go. That may be my premise here, to be honest. This is not
people want to blame genetics.
Yes, thank you. So I'm not, we're obviously, as always, we're not, even though you're a doctor, we're not doing the clinical perspective on, so let's talk about genetics from a Harvard med standpoint. We're talking about the reality of living with it in our lives. Here we all are. We want to be well. And genetics is blamed for so much. And
I think that's changing. And we'll talk about that today. But you and I have grown up, and probably the next generation. If we're Gen X, then, the millennials and certainly our parents talked about it like genetics is why I am what I am.
Yeah. Like, good genes, bad genes, and
and plus they grew up with, Watson and Crick and the discovery of DNA. And it's like,
I don't even know what that is.
Watson and Crick? The guys who discovered DNA.
Oh, okay. Thanks, doctor.
Come on, Kevin.
Okay.
Because they just died, or maybe they died like in the 90s or zeros that was the seminal event of the 50s and 60s, was the discovery of DNA, of how we were put together. And that's when they thought, aha, science is king. We're going to figure out what causes disease and a cleft palate and a club foot and why this guy got this and polio. And so our parents grew up with that thinking process.
Yeah.
Well, I am this way because the DNA says I'm this way.
I'm used to hearing that, oh, good genes. And I could see people saying, because they would look at our kids and say, gosh, or look at you, Dr. James. Here's Dr. James, medical doctor, functional medicine expert. He and his wife live this, uber healthy life. So his kids, good genes. You would expect them to be brilliant, to be great athletes, whatever. Some relevance. You know what? Here's a premise that I just thought. So over here, I'm talking about my angst with a culture who so often is blaming genetics. Now, on the other side is me, who you know very well, who's going to be prone to totally ignore them and give them absolutely no credence in my life at all, maybe to my danger as well. So let's play within the two extremes.
Yeah. One other nuance of that extreme is that group of people over there that you're kind of ignoring is going to look at you and say, well, who are you to talk? You're as healthy as you are because of genetics. It doesn't matter that you try really hard to go exercise and that you recognize you need to go to bed on time. And it also, I think to their harm, it takes away the work of life, right? Like your genetics set you up for the things that you can do, and then you go and do them. But somebody over here who's struggling in life could say, well, you're only having success, Kevin Miller, because of your DNA. And in fact, there's a book called Dancing to Your DNA. So this is a hot topic these days.
Okay. Is it fair to separate it though? Let's pick on me. That if we talk about my genetics, we're talking about the hardwiring of my cells at birth, at conception. Okay.
This is a great place to start. Let me just do the 30,000 foot view of what you're getting ready to talk about.
Because I want to take that and hold that, and then my lifestyle from birth to now. Okay.
Yes. So, and so for people to learn, as we talk about this big topic of genetics and how potentially confusing it can be, and also enlightening, is to think about it this way, that you're what you just said, hardwiring, and we're looking at a computer right there. And let's use this analogy, that this computer is hardwired with a keyboard. And then there's the soft wiring aspect of it over here. So the bottom line, when we're looking at human beings and how much of you is hardwired and how much of you is soft wired is
right. Is good.
Or we could say nature versus nurture. Nature is hardwired, and how you were nurtured from birth is these other things. So hardwiring, you're male.
Right.
You are Caucasian. You have brown eyes. You have, 5 fingers, 5 toes, on each side, and all of these things. That's hardwiring. So the sum total of Kevin, when we talk about your thoughts, your emotions, your heart rate, your biochemistry, your CRP level, your biomarkers, your ability to run a mile, your ability to how you express love and grace and kindness and all these things is soft wired. And the sum total of you, this is the bottom line, is it's 70-30. 30% of your reality is hardwired.
Okay, can we back up further into the hardwiring though? Because you're saying those things that are factual as of my birth. I came out of the womb. But if we look at my genetics, isn't it relevant to say my mom is Joanne Miller and look at her makeup?
Yeah.
My dad's Dan Miller and look at his makeup. So, my mom, from her experiential aspect.
Wait, what do you mean by makeup?
Genetics. Her hardwiring.
I just said her genetics, her makeup when she conceived you was 70% how she was nurtured the previous 30 years and 30% genetic from her parent that she had no choice in, being white, female, whatever, brown hair and all of these other things. But then the sum total of her, and it does matter at conception. If you're born into fear, trauma, hate, we think that this does have an impact on the hardwiring aspect of some people.
I'm curious. I mean, 'cause that's another, the circumstances, because we think about that with my youngest adopted daughter.
Sure.
She was born into,
Chaos.
drugs, alcohol, chaos, fear. I mean, the worst of the worst. How much did that have to affect? Because my muse on that is, I think it was John Robbins, the son of the Baskin Robbins founder, wrote a book called Diet for a New America, probably 35 years ago or so. And I think it was in that book where he talked about, he was really ripping on
ice cream.
Well, animals, dairy and cattle. And he was talking about the difference in a cow in your grandparents' barn
absolutely.
that you snuck up behind and petted and then shot in the head. And it just, boom, there it is. And there's the meat, as opposed to the one in the slaughterhouse,
smelling
strung
blood,
up. Well,
strung up
in that, some of the
tortured.
practices were, strung up by a leg that then came out of socket because the thing weighs so much and its throat is slit, and the terror. And he was saying, think about when you go by a cop and you're speeding, you get that flush, and they literally chemicals of adrenaline and whatever go through your body. They're saying the cow has that. It dies there. What do those chemicals?
Well, you and I, we remember when we had lunch with Stefan, and the technique of hunting, and you don't shoot a deer on the run because they're afraid, and running, it ruins the meat.
Okay, there you go.
And that.
So at conception, how much is our meat ruined?
Well, and the extreme here is a rape.
Okay.
Okay. So there, you've got a father that is not a father, that is, thinking badly and probably grew up badly or whatever, or war, right? People. So, but we cannot look at, okay, by definition, if somebody is born from that kind of conception, then by definition, they're going to be depressed or anxious or short or.
But maybe by definition, they should be aware and cater to that handicap, deficit, whatever it may be.
Let's not now. Okay, one of our genetic things that you have to not ever say again is to use negative words. Kevin, you're not handicapped and at a deficit because you're white, but you are at more risk for a sunburn. Now, if you live in the Sahara, you might call it, woe is me, I'm a poor white guy, I'm going to get sunburned all the time. And it's like, well, that's one way to think.
Okay. So to take up...
Your daughter is not handicapped. It's reality.
Okay.
It's reality.
She has areas of risk.
Absolutely. Just like you.
Okay.
And as a white Caucasian person, your area of risk is skin cancer and a sunburn.
And to that, on a personal development side, which, I talk about on nearly every podcast I do, on a personal development side, here she is. I mean, I just had Stephen Kotler on one of the shows, and he talked about, in his study of these elite and adventure athletes, about how many of them came from really hard backgrounds. And he surmised that because of their hard backgrounds, it made them stronger, nurtured, more resilient, have more capacity. Now, of course, then for every one of them, is there 1,000 people that had similar experiences that it totally wrecked? So we can't go say by proxy it's going to strengthen you. It's kind of that question of, when that traumatic thing happens, do you have post-traumatic stress disorder, or what they're now calling post-traumatic growth as a result of it? Well, again, not a happenstance issue, but
and all of us have a little bit of both.
Right. Okay, so looking at that genetics, of that, the old adage that whoever said, I don't know, Hyman or whoever said, made it up, do we even know? Genetics loads the gun, lifestyle pulls the trigger. So for us to all understand what kind of gun that we have, that could have, maybe because of the trauma, could have some greater strengths as a result of those.
That's right.
But could have some greater risks challenges as well. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's exactly right. If people don't, a takeaway point is that you cannot change your genetics. You cannot change the genes your parents gave you, but you can sure nurture them in a lot of different ways.
Well, and again, we're going to, as we often do on the personal development side, say they can be redeemed.
Well, again, if you say be redeemed, then that means they were bad.
Well, come on!
If you redeem your whiteness,
you just said okay, right? But you just said if we said rape at conception had a possible, it altered the ingredients. It's probably not for the better in that moment, at least.
So it's hard to use this as an example because we don't we don't live in that economy.
Okay, so this is not a genetic thing, but something. So we were talking this morning. As you know, my wife's been in a couple car accidents and has neck injuries that she's always dealing with. And she was talking this morning. We were having family devotions, and she was talking about the redemption of or how she could use that and come out stronger or whatever. But then I said, it also may not have any benefit for you, honey. What if that's what if we could get in the mind of God? And he goes, you know what? That's kind of stinks for you. So sorry, but you now have insight into chronic pain that you can help somebody else and relate to them in a way that Kevin Miller can't, because I've never dealt with it. And that's a redemption for that thing that may just kind of stink overall.
Yeah. We're dancing around with semantics here, and I think you can say that. I just don't want Jadaria to feel like her birth needs redemption. Right? Like it's
okay.
Or think of the person who was born from a rape kind of status. Like everybody from day one would say, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. Right? Like it automatically sets, in our race conscious relationships today, I do think that, like we've talked about privilege and things like that we don't blame you for being white, but there is a challenge to that. Or somebody for being black, but there's a different set of challenges to this.
And they're asking you, have you had cancer in your family? And that's going to affect the rate of your insurance. I mean, they think that it matters that much that they think that's a handicap enough that you're a higher risk. If your dad had cancer, your mom had cancer, their parents had cancer. Okay. So when we talk about literal genetic makeup.
At the same time, insurance is not allowed to ask anything about raw genetic material. No, there's a law.
Which I think is terrible. If I'm going to insure you, I want to know everything. But you're going to say it's not fair because it's not fair to look at it as a handicap. But they are saying at least cancer. What are the other ones they put in there? Heart disease? I don't know. I don't remember anymore on insurance. The questions they ask.
Well, you're talking life insurance. You're not talking health insurance.
Do they not for health insurance?
No, it's illegal. That's the whole debate about pre-existing conditions. Mm-hmm. So one of the pre-existing conditions that we all have is what our genetic code is. Now, the genetic code. Okay, so you're getting into the weeds there. Before we get into the weeds, let's back up at 30,000 foot view.
Okay.
Because that's a weedy question. We're not going to have a solution to that but we're going to come back to that. Is in the genetic code, they thought, so the genetic code was cracked in 1999. Francis Collins, $1 billion project, and it was President Clinton on the front lawn and, announcing this big thing. It was hailed as one of the greatest scientific things, 1999. And it was. So they cracked the genetic code. We know, and you have about 20,000 genes, about 3 billion base pairs. So all of human uniqueness is wrapped up in this code of 3 billion base pairs.
Okay.
And they literally thought, okay, we are now going to figure out diabetes. We are now going to figure out hypertension. We're now going to figure out cancer. And over the next 3, 4, 5 years, lots and lots and lots of research down this pathway. And you know what they found out? We don't know a thing. Every human has the genetic code that can become diabetes, cancer, hypertension, all of the diseases. We are all genetically set up to be able to become hypertensive or diabetic or depressed.
Okay.
We can all do that. Now, some people are more predisposed, but is that because they grew up a certain way or we're back into nurture?
Well, because hang on,
let's go to your genetic or your insurance people now. Okay. Now they know all 3 billion of you.
Okay.
They know nothing. There's no knowledge of, you're more at risk. Now, there's a smattering of Huntington's disease and some other things that genetically, Kevin, you're going to die at 52. But it's so rare.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't even matter to the insurance.
So look at my youngest daughter and her history. So so she had a mother, grew up on a Native American reservation, fed a diet of sugar. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's unbelievable. And I'm saying they, and I know that's not fair to paint a broad brush, but if anybody's out there that takes offense at that, I spent a lot of time on Native American reservations, and I'm going to paint with a broad brush. The majority of it's really bad at least in the core of them. So, but I know this one, I can speak specifically. She grew up on sugar. She grew up on empty carbs. That was the primary diet via, drinks and food, and a lot of alcohol and a lot of drugs. That is what she was doing from a lifestyle aspect. And I'm to understand that was what was done before her by her parents as well. That's what she came into. And so there I've got this daughter. And so we're looking and saying, her genetics, 30% of her hardwiring, it's hard not to feel like more of that was affected by what she was conceived from, the soup of her conception. Because the dad was the same way. The dad,
this is fair. So dad. One of the things today is to say you're using a subset of people to think, okay, and by the way, you needed to explain to people that was your older adopted daughter who got exposed to alcohol and those kind of things.
Well, both. Oldest and youngest.
Well, your youngest didn't consume alcohol.
Oh, no. I'm talking about her parents.
Conception. Her parents. Okay, gotcha.
Sorry.
So I do think this is part of what I think in terms of a functional medicine approach influenced by a biblical thought process would be that our genetic code is becoming more unstable, unraveling. That our genetic code, as generations go by, we're not getting better. We're not getting more resilient genetically. We're not getting in fact, we're getting the other way. So I agree with you in that now we have a Native American population in this particular instance where because of thousands of reasons of American history and all of these reasons where this group of people have landed in a place where not only has genetics been influenced by a couple hundred years now of too much alcohol, of a political sense of hopelessness that we've lost our way,
and lack of purpose. I mean,
missing all of these things, and then modernly the response of many people is to put a lot of money into the situation, and so there's big buildings of hospitals and schools and things like that. But the grocery store is still how you described it. They didn't go back to a traditional.
In this reservation, one of the things that you'll notice, it's stark when you go into the one of the little bitty in the center of the pueblo that they call it, is this little store. You go in there, and the amount of items that are not real food, they're in bags and whatever, that are orange and red dye number, whatever. Isn't that like a brain exciter or something like that, supposedly?
I don't know.
It's total like the flaming hot, Doritos or whatever they are. But it's dark. That is really. There's like a show, Joe versus a Volcano. If anybody's seen that old Tom Hanks movie, great movie. We own it, and they go to this kind of a Native American island, whatever, and everybody drinks Orange Crush. That's like their thing. And it's a terrible depiction of a reality. It's so stark when you go to this pueblo and see the amount of not only junk food and empty carbs and sugar and stuff, but of these salty snacks that are all the high red ones. And then we had some of these, we've had a lot of them stay at our home, and that's what they gravitate towards. Even the drinks like the Mountain Dew, anything red. And it's just interesting.
And you could conjecture and say, can we set up a study that says, okay, we're going to quantify how much red dye goes into a group of people, and then we're going to look at genetic markers right now and then 3 generations down the road, because it's going to take a long period of time. And of course, we don't have those studies because that would be very, very expensive and 80 years of time to get 3 generations down the road. So it's conjecture. But I agree with you that it sure seems to make sense that the genetics of the parents are going to influence the genetics of the children down this particular pathway. And I think that's part of why we're seeing the increasing rate of unravelingness
of everything.
Of
everything. I mean, and I'll make that statement. Here we are, again, in America, more access to the best knowledge ever. We have and conveniences and whatever. We have every reason to be to be the healthiest and happiest ever. And we are absolute. I mean, it's irrefutable. We are the sickest and saddest we've ever been.
I'm going to play a little devil's advocate.
Well, the stats, though, the hockey stick of diabetes, of heart disease, of diseases of depression. Not depression. What is it called?
Despair.
Disease of despair. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that is happening. And at the same time, we've never had this literacy rate. We've never had the economic freedom. We've never had the amount of cleanliness of potable water around the world, worldwide.
Which, again, every reason that we should be happier than ever.
True. The socioeconomic implications of these kind of things have to be considered too, because remember when we talked about the average lifespan went down in America. But if you go to a different socioeconomic level, it went up.
Well, and I just read Stephen Kotler and Peter Diamandis' book, The Future's Faster Than You Think. And in there, they're talking, he talks about going back. They kind of go back in history when the lifespan was 40. That's about as long as you lived. You got married at 16, you were married for a while, did whatever, and you died at 40, whatever.
Yeah, but that's.
I know, I don't like that perspective.
That's not fair because people back then, Abe Lincoln and Benjamin Franklin and George Washington were in their 80s.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of child and infant mortality and death in childbirth.
There was. But the thing that I wanted to pull out of that, though, so even though now we want to tout the life expectancy that's, I don't know what they say now, 85 or 87 or something like that, but as you often point out, that's life expectancy. That is looking at when the heart stops beating. Yeah. And my term I keep coming to is, but when does the soul stop beating? That seems to be earlier and earlier than ever, but we don't talk about that.
So the formal word for that is lifespan versus health span.
That's right. I keep forgetting about that.
And you went a step further to say soul span.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where, now we're into the topic of faith and meaning, passion, purpose. Who am I? Why am I here? And all those kind of things. We could say health span as I like to go mountain biking and I like to, I want to be able to go skiing when I'm 80 and those kind of things would be a health span. And then disease span. How long do I live with disease? Yeah. High blood pressure. That's
a great topic for another show just to talk about. Well, talk about that.
Genetics does not have that much influence on this.
And so that's a big question. Topic. So if we look at this, we're 25 minutes in to say, okay, with your patients for the average person, how much importance, gravity, attention should genetics get? Would you say
30%?
Well, okay. I mean, because I've never had. Have I? I don't think I've done a genetic test. You did.
Yeah, I did.
And you got into doing that with patients. And so you had people taking 23andMe?
Yeah. And then we did a statistical analysis through a third party on the 23andMe data.
I just remember you were doing it. So here you're having people take 23 or get the 23andMe genetic test, and you had to pay to go get extra education to understand how the heck to even translate this to anything of tangible value or tangible diagnosis.
And for everybody who's listening, we're going to save you thousands of dollars by concluding what I learned.
Please.
Here's the conclusion. At the end of the day, when you go now we're not talking about ancestry. So if you love ancestry.
If you want to find out that you're 1/3 Jewish and
that's different.
Italian.
But if you're looking at Ancestry.com and 23andMe and Nebula and all of these other genetic companies out there to try and figure out your health.
Which, are they even able to say that yet? Did FDA approve them to where they can even cite?
Yes, to a degree. To a degree. But 23andMe got shut down because they were speaking too medical. 23andMe is now stated on their front page as they are a drug development company. That is their thing. And they are using the data of genetics to make better drugs, which is a good thing. Because if you know that if you took this drug, you're going to barf your guts up versus this one that you're not, then it's a better selection method. Okay. So I spent a lot of time trying to say, okay, I've got to figure this out. And I like Ben Lynch and read the book Dirty Genes, and I think that's a pretty good place to start. But at the end of the day, Kevin Miller, how much of your thought construct is in terms of how you eat and live and think and breathe and how you interface with everybody else? Do you keep thinking how white you are? How tall you are? What color your eyes are? What color your hair is? Okay, how your liver is set up to process your food.
No, not to that degree, but you know that we have a big populace out there, and you see the ads and for things that is worried about am I going to get cancer? Am I going to get dementia?
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the biggest fears.
At the end of the day, that's what I just said. Genetically, yes, you can get dementia. And genetically is not going to tell you nothing about your risk level. And I'm going to back up right there because
you just hit the big holy grail, because everybody who is taking care, all the baby boomers out there who are taking care of their parents who have dementia and are in the old folks home are scared. And they're just wondering, again, is the lottery going to, the lottery's higher in my...
Right. They should be scared. And I do think everybody should get their genetics done.
Oh.
Because it even though you don't walk around thinking, oh my gosh, I'm a white guy, you have figured out what SPF level you need. You have figured out how to wear a hat, and you changed your lifestyle.
Right. And like you talk about a lot, my one of my sons, Ian, no idea why.
Needs more SPF.
He's this paper white dude.
Opposite of a Native American.
I don't know how. I've got some kids biologically with darker skin, and then here he is. So can I say he has you don't want to say handicap, but he has a propensity.
He has the opportunity to be really aware of how at risk he is for sunburn.
Right, a higher propensity. So again, how many people out there wondering if in the lottery a higher propensity for dementia or diabetes, heart disease,
and there are
cancer?
I think there's about 20 genetic markers that are worth knowing.
Okay, but
before we get there, at the end of the day, when you know these markers and you're going to say, I'm at higher risk, what am I going to do about that? What do you think we're going to say?
I know, because but that's what we do on the show is we talk about the reality of human nature.
And it gives people more motivation to actually change their diet and go to bed on time.
Or less, because if I do my genetic test and it says, dude, you are rock solid, then I'm heading to the donut mill for Bear Claw. But that is propensity too.
And that's what I'm saying is at the end of the day with genetics, you'll never find that. Whatever rock star is not genetically defined. You just got done referring to the study about all of these highfalutin people who came from hard backgrounds, but what about maybe they were 1 out of 1,000?
I think they were, yeah.
And other people got crushed by that.
Exactly.
So if you look at the genetics, you would say,
it's not good to go have
it's not good to be having this much challenge.
You might be the president of the United States and you might be in the gutter.
Skid Row.
Chances are 1,000% you're going to be in the gutter.
That's right.
Or 999. Yeah.
Okay. So some people, and I could mention their name and you would know them, got really mad at me for doing, genetics back when I was doing them more often. And she's like, I did not want to know that I was at a higher risk for dementia.
I think that's terrible. It's ignorant. Well, I would want to know.
The only reason you would want to know is if you can do something about it.
I can.
How? Well, that's what you're
lifestyle
presuming. Yes.
Well,
we're back to.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
Is there a proof that if you run an extra mile a day, no? So at the end of the day, there's a lot of question marks. And we are now 20 years past cracking the genetic code. And it has not made that much of a difference in medicine.
Okay, let me ask it this way then, as far as an applicable thing for our lives. So I had our first 3 kids. So we got these 3 kids, all within a close range. My oldest one, who had epilepsy. And, pretty significant at the time. And so we looked at, here he has this reality. It's it's a reality. He has this challenge. Okay. He has this challenge. And we looked at the things, we saw some things happening experientially in life. And then we read about it and found out some of the things about epilepsy and in his, specific makeup that chaos, loud noise, we would see him just shut down. Chuck E. Cheese, which is like, we're a parent, you take a kid, and he would just start going south. I mean, it was like really weird. We would take him out and he's like the calm. He didn't even conceptualize it. We just see it. He was a little kid. We realized that. We read about sleep and how how sleep was such a benefit to this. So we took affirmative action for him. So we got 3 kids, but we're going to let 2 go to the birthday party. And he got to where he didn't even want to. If it was going to be loud and chaos, he didn't want to. We advocated for his sleep. Now, would it have been just as well for my other kids to get just as much sleep as him? Sure. Did it help them to be within the chaos, the noise, the pizza, the Coke? Probably not. But we did, we are humans, and we could say that here's a perfect life, which is hard to quantify, but we say this is what we should all do. But we know that we're not. And then is it a benefit to know where you need to take affirmative action?
Yes. Yes. We could look at the two daughters there and say they just tolerated Chuck E. Cheese. It wasn't good for them. It wasn't, right? Their genetics was set up in such a way that they
Are we going to get sued for slandering Chuck E. Cheese? Do they even exist? Probably shut down at this point.
COVID, yeah. So even as I just got done saying that at the end of where I got frustrated with genetics was at the end of the day, what are you going to do about it? Winds up being a supplement. If you go and do almost all the websites that say, hey, send us your genetics and we'll tell you what to eat. And what they mean is we'll show you a supplement list.
Right.
So that's where I got frustrated.
Wasn't that what the telomere company did kind of? Look at your telomeres and, you're at this percentage and then send you lifestyle.
The telomeres was the company that we used, and I liked them because at the end of the day, their four main things was, okay, if your telomeres are short, what are you going to do about it? Well, sleep is a big one, exercise is a big one, nutrition is a big one, and safety, which is what we would call relationship, feeling safe in your own home, not being in a war-torn environment or a place of poverty where you just don't know where your next meal's coming from.
Talk about that. So it was mentioned. They mentioned it. Kotler and Diamandis in Futures Faster. They mentioned Oura Ring for sleep, and because they're talking about the technology aspect, and they talked about telomeres and the ability to look at those. And so, layman's term, it's your chromosome health. Is that fair to say?
Fantastic book was Carol Blackburn, and I forgot the name of the book. The telomere effect. She got the Nobel Prize with a team of, finding, describing, characterizing telomeres. Basically, your chromosome, if you think of a shoelace, the telomere is the cap on the end of the chromosome, like on your shoelace. So it keeps the end of the chromosome intact, or the end of not the chromosome, but the chromatin, or the one aspect of the DNA. It keeps it intact. And if your telomere length is shortened, then that corresponds to age. So as you age, we'll shorten it. It corresponds to these things: sleep, nutrition, exercise.
So and the reason I brought it up is because here you and I are, and I would say we had in a lot of ways, we had a very similar upbringing.
Yeah.
Mom and dad, safe home, faith, good relationships for the most part. We got out. We did well.
Standard American diet.
We haven't had trauma. We're privileged, white American men, and we took this telomeres test, and mine came out pretty good, and yours did not.
Right.
And to look at that and go, what? I don't even know genetic deficiency, whatever issues are in your past any worse than mine. We don't know. To the point to where we talked to the chief medical officer. Yeah. They didn't really have much to tell us other than citing, not in you, but just saying, well, we have seen an impact from ACE scores, adverse childhood effects, right? Mm-hmm. Which
goes back to safety.
You don't have unless you were beaten and bludgeoned and just don't know about it. But we don't know.
Well, and he also said, obviously I did grow up in the standard American diet. Maybe that shortened my telomeres.
So did I.
Right. But maybe you also grew up in the sunshine and you got sunburned XY enough to have more AK on your face and I got just as many sunburns and I don't. Right. I mean, the surrounding environment is still going to have a different impact on your unique genetic self.
But that is where we look at the genetics. Did some thread of 30% genetics come in and your telomeres are theoretically
exposed.
less?
I didn't tolerate the standard American diet.
Okay.
Right. Like I wouldn't blame my genetics. I'm not set up for short telomeres, probably. 30% chance that I might be just set up to have short telomeres, and that could be true. But I don't have short-lived people in my family who, just died of whatever reasons at 60.
Right.
And in fact, I have long-lived people.
Do you?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it goes back to maybe my response to the standard American diet from 0 to 30 was more devastating, just like your son. Same Chuck E. Cheese, and for him,
that would be interesting to see his telomeres. I mean, to take this, you said the word again, though, to blame genetics. And if there was a point to the show, like, what the heck are we talking about? It. We're not doing this to inform people of clinical issues on genetics. It's what do we do about it? How do we look at it?
Yeah.
And I would say, what is our point? It's that there is no benefit at all in blaming genetics. There may be there is in living a lifestyle to do our best to, and I don't know if you're going to like this, but I would say to combat whatever genetic predispositions we may have.
And we all have them.
We
are all on the spectrum. But let's use some of the specific 20 because at the end of the day, I still think people should look.
Okay.
Because it's data. And if you have a wise, mature thought process, you can use that data to help you make decisions about how to live.
I would say it's good if we're talking about behavioral psychology.
Yeah.
It's good for us to know because it will help us make better decisions.
That's right.
Okay.
100% agree.
Okay.
So, Kevin, I think you should go buy your stuff.
Yeah, I never did. We were going to, and I forgot. You did do one. Did you do 23andMe?
I did do 23andMe back then. I would, and I might choose a different company these days, but let's use APO4. So APOE.
Layman's term.
Yeah. So it's called APOE. That's the name of the gene, and apolipoprotein E is what it stands for, and it's you could write a book just on this topic in and of itself. But so everybody has a way that their genes code for developing this kind of cholesterol. Apolipoprotein means cholesterol, or is a lipoprotein. It's a piece of fat, and your body builds your cholesterol much more than you eat it. So your body's making its own cholesterol. So apolipoprotein E, and you can have a genetic construct that is labeled a 2, a 3, or 4. So how your genes are set up from your parents. One parent gave you a 2 or 3 or 4, and the other parent gave you a 2 or 3 or 4. So for people that are APOE 4, and especially if you are 4-4, so homozygous, we don't need to go down, language of genetics today, but both parents gave you a 4, then you have right off the bat an increased chance of getting Alzheimer's. About 15 times normal, or 15%. I don't know if I'm saying that the right way. A 15% increased chance of, right off the bat, doesn't matter, if you live good, live bad, live this way or that, just statistically. So it does matter if you live good or bad, of course, but statistically, 15% chance.
Is that person generally going to have a higher cholesterol?
Generally, yes.
Because I've seen that. I've seen people where, man, my experiences, they live healthier than I do even, and they've got this stupid high cholesterol.
Yeah. So it helps them to make decisions. So an APO4, and if they've been having years of cholesterol, I would be more inclined to say, yeah, you should take a statin. But I don't want to take a statin. Okay. Right? Like it's kind of like the person saying, but I don't want to wear sunscreen. Okay, you're just more inclined to get a sunburn.
And you have those people, though, who come in with something. They go, I do not want a drug. And so you do your best on the nutritional supplement side and the lifestyle design.
Yeah, the whole thing. Part of lifestyle would be, are you a lifestyle of take medicines or drugs, or don't take drugs or pharmaceuticals, right? Like there's nothing wrong with pharmaceuticals. It's not like it's bad. It's a tool for a person to use. Yeah. That just like surgery, there's a time and a place for anesthesia. I would rather not do natural surgery.
Right.
They did on the fields of the Civil War. That's a bad thing.
Okay. So somebody here who has this genetic predisposition.
That's right. They're an APO44. And in fact, this one person, that's what that gene was. And she erupted into tears. Like she heard it as, I'm going to get Alzheimer's. And I would look at you, Kevin, and say, just because you have white skin, do you think I'm going to get sunburn and skin cancer? No. But are you at increased risk? Is it a challenge for you to think through that?
Should I take affirmative action?
And should you take action?
Shade myself, use sunscreen more so than somebody who's not at much.
Shade myself?
Shade.
Shade.
Shade. No, the hair would keep it off. Yeah, shave myself. Little known facts,
I was
folks.
going to say, we won't
This will
tell
help.
people what you...
Yeah, just shave. That's all you got to do. Shade.
Shade.
Duh,
Got it.
duh. I think about that because we do that with Ian with his white skin. We're going to go out on the beach or something like that, man. We're going to bring shade
him
for
an
that
umbrella,
guy.
yeah. APO4 is probably the clearest genetic mark outside of things like white skin and things that we already take for granted. It's obvious.
Yeah.
It's obvious that you have to think about being white skin, but things that are on the inside are not obvious. If you're APO4 or how your liver is set up to do detoxification and that's what's interesting about 23andMe is they'll say you're more likely to have a caffeine response. You're more likely to get flush if you have alcohol. And a lot of people will say, well, I don't get a caffeine response. It's just likelihood.
Right.
Because you have an APO4 does not mean you're going to get skin cancer or Alzheimer's, but you do have an increased likelihood.
Well, in that with cholesterol, you can have some specific things to do for that. But when you get the one with cancer, have you had cancer in your family? Yeah, dad had this cancer and uncle had this and aunt had this and all these different. I mean, what do you do?
Cancer is a different animal. So, in fact, the driving force behind cracking the genetic code was the war on cancer. That's where that money came from, was war on cancer. So, because they thought cancer since the 70s has been attacked through the genetic lens, it's a genetic issue, and even looking at the genetics of cancer itself. And it's been a failure, right? So every person has the genetics of cancer. Okay, this is a different topic, but write this down because this needs to be a show.
Yeah.
I'll say this phrase. We all have cancer all the time, every day, and your body sees it, stops it. Cancer is normal. It is a normal part of life. Cancer has been around since the dawn.
Well, which you could say at this great time to do this amongst coronavirus, that virus is always there. We're always exposed. It's always
been bacteria.
And our body's doing what it's supposed to, hopefully is doing what it's supposed to do
to live in symbiosis, to tolerate, and at some point to intolerate, and we call that getting sick and mounting a fever and having an inflammatory response and all of these other things that we've also talked about. How do you enhance the body's ability to be as well as possible? Well, cancer is going on all the time. You have it. And what the real issue is, why does the body not see it and not stop it?
Right.
That's the question. And it's less likely to be that issue to be genetically related. It's much more likely that we live a lifestyle that shuts down the tumor suppressor genes that we have and turns on the oncogenic genes the growth genes that we have. And what's the number one thing that does that? I told you the other day. We're overnutriented.
Right. Overfed,
underfasted,
undernourished,
underslept, overstressed. Now, genetically, all of us have cancer going on. We can all get it. But, if you undersleep me, am I going to get cancer versus undersleeping you? Or am I just going to get a headache and you get the cancer?
Right. And then we're back to the things that we do and how are things going to manifest, and it's going to be different. If they manifest, and how are they going to? So if we look at again, we could take this and say genetics. On one hand, who cares about your genetics? Here is, if we could create, which we can come to some aspect of the best lifestyle you can live to be healthy and ward off illness, sickness, disease, and whatever. But you're still saying, okay, yes, there's that. And it would be great if we'd all adhere to this. And we're not going to. We're all going to have our appetites and vices and things we do. Knowing what your genetic predispositions are may help you be accountable to some certain areas of affirmative action in your lifestyle, diet, whatever, to help address those, like that APO.
Like the APO.
Yeah.
Let me restate what you just said a different way. Back to that 70-30 idea, or 80-20.
Right.
Is if you go over here to these good lifestyle measuring, ideas, some people are still going to get sick.
Right.
Right. Okay. So let's go over here to all these people, and Kevin Miller, you wake up tomorrow and you have cancer.
Yeah.
And you're going to be, did I eat wrong or this? Well,
I failed. All this effort and I failed. Yeah.
Well, it's going to happen and you're going to die.
Yeah.
Right. So we're trying to push that marker back by these things.
Yes.
But if you knew, 20% of people over there, they still lived really well, but he still got cancer or diabetes or heart disease or whatever. The genetic, if we know about, you had a predisposition, let's stay with Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
You had that APO4. So over here, if you had been the guy to say, well, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and choose to take a little bit of a statin because that seems to reduce my risk. Okay. Does that guarantee you that you're not going to do it? No, it just puts another little notch on the thing over here. Now, the problem is people don't generally turn into their genetics until they're already over there and sick.
Yeah.
And then they want to figure it out. I'm like, you're. And I do appreciate Dr. Ben Lynch, and he wrote a book, Dirty Genes, Genes, Dirty Genes. And he said, hey, don't ever blame your depression on genetics or your Alzheimer's or whatever. He's like, that's the wrong stance. Don't blame. You're not depressed because of your genetics or Alzheimer's because of your genetics. You were born with your genetics and you lived them. And you created an epigenome, and that is far more influential on how your genes are behaving than the actual genetic materials, the epigenome, which is lifestyle. But what about somebody who is, and we have a lot of these patients, they're doing the nutrition, they're doing the exercise, they're doing the whatever, and we're not reaching goals. We're not reaching their biomarkers or whatever their goals are. And at that point, I'd say, let's go by the data and have this thought process and say, well, son of a gun, you're APO44. Well, I would change this and that and this and that, and I would take these supplements. And is it going to guarantee that you live forever? No, but we're just reducing the chance of the bad outcome, increasing the chance of the good outcome.
Yeah. And when we're just on that overall perspective, I am motivated to be living a lifestyle that will prevent as much as possible, let's say, cancer here. So if I get diagnosed tomorrow, I'm going to assume that I help stave it off, hopefully. It could have happened 10 years ago. So maybe I bought myself 10 years with a healthy lifestyle or gave
Both.
myself the ability to hopefully get past it and recover instead of succumbing to it. Either way, I'm better off living this healthier.
Let me give you one more and in that.
Okay.
In the past, did you live perfectly?
No.
So some of that imperfection is a part of why you have cancer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But you can't go back and blame.
Right. But
you look forward and say, okay, I don't want to do this.
Yeah. And the point is the motivation as opposed to going, oh my gosh, I'm going to die anyways. Or I got cancer. Well, all that, I should have been eating donuts all the time and just enjoying life.
No, you gave yourself, I agree, added years of not cancer. If not comparing you to other people, but comparing you to the theoretical other Kevin.
Yeah, the possibilities of Kevin.
Possibility.
Right.
And you also gave yourself a much better chance of withstanding chemo, withstanding surgery, withstanding whatever it is you need to do to give your body the best chance of.
Which is what billing Lance Armstrong got back when he got cancer, is that he was able to go through it and recover at a better level because of his, overall health and different varieties.
And he had a good cancer.
Did he?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's curable.
Okay. Well, but that's the billing he got. But I like the premise of that, though, of, what can I do if I'm going to get that thing? If I can't totally ward it off, which you tell me all the time, Kevin, you can't.
You're going to die.
You're going to die. And I can't guarantee, there's nothing I can do to guarantee I'm not going to get cancer, that I'm not going to get.
But you'll go through it better.
Yeah.
Here's a good analogy for that is pregnancy. Like a lot of women, my wife was one of them who kind of had, maybe your wife too, who kind of had the thought process of, I'm pretty healthy. I bet I have a really easy pregnancy. And I'm like, no, you won't. Uh-huh. It's going to still hurt. Uh-huh. It is gonna still be a challenge and all of those kind of things. But I guarantee you, when you have the mindset of I bet I'm gonna have a good pregnancy, you are way better off than if you have the mindset of, oh my gosh, this alien is on me and I have nothing to do with this and I'm just gonna be miserable. You will have a miserable pregnancy.
Okay, well then just on the mindset, this is the thing you and I talk about so often, that we do not, true fact, we have not gotten many illnesses. We do not, come down with stuff much. And is that because of, the diet and exercise and the whatever, or how much of that do we attribute to the fact that we just don't think we will, we expect not to?
I think some of
it's got to be
related to that.
It's placebo
but placebo. Have we done a show on placebo?
No.
That needs to be on there. The biochemistry of placebo. Placebo in America has a negative connotation, like, oh, it's all in your head. I'd be like, well, if
it makes you better,
loving and joyful and
stinking cares.
That's right. Yeah. Give me more placebo then. Yeah. Better yet is I want to wake up on purpose with a mindset of I'm not going to get sick and I'm going to have a good day. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's just all in your head.
No doubt. If I start giving one of my kids a pill and say, dude, this is guaranteed to make you run 10% faster, they will likely run 10% faster, even if it's full of air.
The new way to be good parents.
It's psychology. Do you have a patient?
I do.
You do? All right. Well, you're a doctor, so that happens. Okay. Well, I felt like we need to do justice to this aspect of genetics of what do we do about it?
I think we could do another show on how do we read our genetics, like, because APOE, MTHFR, CMT, these things do have. It's another hour of how do you read your genetic report.
Well, so this is the
how about you do
psychological.
We use that as an example of go through, share your dirty underwear.
Okay, so this is the psychological perspective aspect on genetics for those of you who want to be philosophical. Thank you. Yeah. We could do a tactical one, a clinical one.
I like tactical.
Tactical? Okay, good. Because I'm no good clinically. Well, friends, I'm sure you know some people in your life who maybe don't give enough credit to their genetic set points, and they do well to give them some focus, like myself. And you likely know some folks who give way too much credit and blame to their genetics. So maybe think about sharing this message with them, whether you share the podcast itself or just some of the key messages that you heard and resonated with you. Friends, thank you for tuning into Self-Helpful, where I curate the sea of new personal development materials and help you integrate wisdom into your life, because we all want to elevate our own experience and improve the way we show up for others.